The atomic wedgie. On December 21st, 2013, a drunken argument in Pottawatomie County, Oklahoma turned into one of the most bizarre deaths ever recorded. Denver St. Clair, a 58-year-old man, had been drinking with his stepson, 33-year-old Brad Lee Davis. The two had a complicated relationship, marked by years of tension and resentment. That night, their conflict escalated. Davis grabbed his stepfather's underwear from behind. What started as a humiliating prank quickly became something far worse. He pulled the elastic waistband upward with violent force, stretching it over St. Clair's head and down around his neck. This was what teenagers call an atomic wedgie, a schoolyard joke taken to its extreme limit, but Davis didn't stop pulling. The elastic band tightened around St. Clair's throat. What had been an act of anger and humiliation transformed into strangulation. St. Clair couldn't breathe. He clawed at the fabric, digging into his neck, but the elastic was too tight, too deeply embedded in his skin. His airway closed. The medical examiner later confirmed that death took several minutes. St. Clair remained conscious as oxygen stopped reaching his brain. His face turned red, then purple. Petechial hemorrhaging appeared in his eyes, tiny blood vessels bursting from the pressure. He fought for air that wouldn't come. Davis stood watching as his stepfather suffocated. By the time he realized what he had done, it was too late. The underwear had become a ligature, cutting off blood flow to the brain and compressing the windpipe. St. Clair collapsed to the floor. When police arrived, they found the body still wearing the underwear wrapped around the neck. The elastic waistband had left deep marks in the skin that matched the pattern perfectly. The autopsy listed cause of death as asphyxiation by ligature strangulation. The weapon was a pair of underwear. Davis was arrested and later convicted of first-degree manslaughter. The Bigfoot hoaxer. On August 26, 2012, Randy Tenley stood in the middle of U.S. Highway 93 near Kalispell, Montana. It was after dark. The 44-year-old wore a full military-style ghillie suit, a camouflage outfit covered in shaggy strips of fabric designed to make a person invisible in natural surroundings. His plan was simple. He wanted to create a Bigfoot sighting, to scare passing drivers and hopefully make the local news. His friends waited on the shoulder of the road, watching as Tenley positioned himself in the traffic lane. Cars approached in the darkness. The ghillie suit worked exactly as designed. Against the black pavement and night sky, Tenley was nearly impossible to see. He looked like a shadow, a vague shape that didn't register as human until it was too late. The first car came fast. The driver never saw him. There were no brake lights, no swerving, no attempt to stop. The vehicle struck Tenley at highway speed, throwing his body several feet down the road. The impact broke bones and caused severe trauma, but it wasn't immediately fatal. He lay on the pavement, injured and unable to move. Seconds later, a second car approached. The driver had no warning, no time to react. The headlights illuminated Tenley's body only at the last moment. The car ran over him. This impact finished what the first had started. The crushing force caused massive internal injuries. His chest cavity collapsed. Organs ruptured. Death came quickly after the second strike. His friends ran from the roadside, screaming for help. When police arrived, they explained the Bigfoot hoax. Investigators found no skid marks from either vehicle. Both drivers never saw what they hit until impact. The ghillie suit had worked too well. Tenley died invisible on a dark Montana highway, killed by his own successful disguise. The deadly ding-dong ditch. On January 19, 2020, 6 teenagers drove through a quiet neighborhood in Corona, California. They had just pulled off a classic prank, ringing the doorbell at Anurag Chandra's home and running back to their car. It was ding-dong ditch, harmless fun that teenagers had been doing for generations. Among them were Daniel Hawkins, Jacob Ivoscu, and Drake Ruiz. But Chandra didn't see it as harmless. He was enraged. Within seconds, he got into his car and began chasing them. What started as a prank became a high-speed pursuit through residential streets. Chandra accelerated to 99 miles per hour, weaving between parked cars and through intersections. The teenagers tried to escape, their driver pushing the car faster, but Chandra stayed close behind. The chase lasted several minutes. Chandra pulled alongside the teens' vehicle. He didn't just follow them. He deliberately rammed their car with his own. The impact forced them off the road. At that speed, the driver had no chance to regain control. The car veered sharply, left the pavement, and slammed into a tree. The collision was brutal. The tree punched through the passenger compartment, metal crumpled inward. The 3 sitting in the back died instantly from the impact. Their bodies were thrown against seatbelts with enough force to cause fatal internal injuries. The tree had essentially cut through the vehicle's structure, crushing everything in its path. The other 3 teenagers survived with serious injuries. Chandra stopped at the scene and was arrested immediately. He was later charged with 3 counts of murder. A doorbell prank had ended in triple homicide. 3 families lost their sons because a grown man couldn't control his rage over a momentary annoyance. Chandra was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Royal Radio prank In early December 2012, Jacintha Saldanha was working her shift as a nurse at King Edward VII Hospital in London. The hospital was treating Kate Middleton, who was pregnant with her first child. That morning, the phone rang at the nurse's station. Saldanha answered. On the other end were two Australian radio hosts pretending to be Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Charles. They asked for information about Kate's condition. Saldanha believed the impersonation was real. She transferred the call to another nurse who gave details about the royal patient's medical status. The entire conversation was recorded. Within hours, the radio station broadcast it internationally. The prank became global news. Saldanha's voice was heard by millions of people around the world. The hospital launched an internal investigation. Media coverage intensified. Saldanha felt crushing shame and guilt. She believed she had betrayed patient confidentiality, failed the royal family, and humiliated her hospital. The weight of public exposure became unbearable. She couldn't escape the knowledge that her mistake had been broadcast worldwide and replayed endlessly across news channels. Over the next few days, her mental state deteriorated rapidly. She wrote 3 notes expressing her guilt and shame. On December 7th, just days after the prank call, Saldanha was found dead in her nursing accommodation. She had chosen to leave by hanging. Colleagues discovered her body. The news sparked international outrage. The radio station suspended both hosts indefinitely. Questions arose about whether a prank call could be considered responsible for someone's death. Legal experts debated culpability, but for Saldanha's family, the cause was clear. A joke meant for entertainment had created such overwhelming shame that a dedicated nurse saw no way forward except to end her own life. The prank call had lasted minutes. Its consequences were permanent. The dry ice pool. On February 29, 2020, a birthday party was underway in Moscow, Russia. The celebration was for Ekaterina Didenko, a social media influencer with a large following. Her husband, 32-year-old Valentin Didenko, was among the guests gathered around an indoor swimming pool. Someone had planned a visual spectacle to make the party memorable. They would dump dry ice into the pool to create a dramatic fog effect. Partygoers carried more than 60 pounds of dry ice to the pool's edge. They dumped it into the warm water all at once. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. Thick white fog erupted from the pool, rolling across the surface and spilling onto the deck. Guests cheered and laughed. Several people, including Valentin, jumped into the pool to swim through the fog. But dry ice is frozen carbon dioxide. When it sublimates in warm water, it releases massive amounts of CO2 gas. Carbon dioxide is heavier than air. It sinks and displaces oxygen. The gas was invisible, odorless, and filled the indoor space rapidly. The swimmers in the pool suddenly couldn't breathe. There was no smoke, no visible danger, just the absence of oxygen where air should have been. Valentin and 2 others lost consciousness almost immediately. Their bodies went limp in the water. Other guests tried to help but began collapsing themselves as they entered the gas cloud. Confusion spread through the room. People gasped for air that wasn't there. The decorative fog had become a suffocating blanket of carbon dioxide. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but 3 people were already dead, including Valentin. Several others required hospitalization for asphyxiation. The autopsy confirmed carbon dioxide poisoning. Ekaterina had lost her husband at her own birthday party. A prank meant to create beautiful photographs had displaced all the oxygen in the room and killed 3 people in minutes. The initiation impalement. On June 6, 1892, Wilkins Rustin stood on a street in New Haven, Connecticut, surrounded by members of the Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity at Yale University. The sophomore was undergoing initiation, a ritual that was common and largely unregulated in that era. His fraternity brothers had prepared a test. They tied a blindfold tightly around his eyes. He could see nothing. They instructed him to run at full speed down the city street. Other members would watch and laugh. Rustin had no choice but to trust them. He began running, relying only on sound and the feeling of pavement under his feet. He sprinted blindly through the darkness, disoriented and unable to judge distance or direction. His fraternity brothers watched from the sidewalk as he gained speed. A horse-drawn carriage sat stationary on the street ahead. Rustin couldn't see it. He ran directly into the carriage at full force. A sharp wooden pole jutted from the vehicle's frame. The pole penetrated his abdomen. The impact drove it deep into his body, puncturing through his intestines and abdominal cavity. Rustin screamed. He was conscious, aware, impaled on the wooden shaft. His fraternity brothers rushed forward and removed the blindfold. They saw the pole extending through his body. He was taken immediately to medical care, but doctors in 1892 had limited ability to treat such injuries. The punctured intestines leaked bacteria into his abdominal cavity. Peritonitis developed, an infection spreading through his abdomen that 19th century medicine could not stop. Rustin endured 5 days of agony. Fever consumed him. The pain intensified as sepsis spread through his system. His body slowly shut down from the infection. On June 11, 1892, Wilkins Rustin died. A single moment of blindfolded running had resulted in a slow death by infection, all in the name of fraternity tradition. The blindfolded gorge. On October 14, 1873, Mortimer Leggett stood with other pledges near a railroad trestle in Ithaca, New York. He was pledging the Kappa Alpha Society at Cornell University. The fraternity had chosen a location known for its danger, a narrow railroad bridge that crossed high above a deep gorge. It was night. Members of the fraternity prepared their initiation ritual. They tied blindfolds around the eyes of each pledge, including Leggett, complete darkness. The pledges were led onto the trestle and instructed to walk across. They could feel only the wooden railroad ties beneath their feet and empty space on either side. The bridge was narrow. One wrong step meant a fall into the gorge below. Balance became difficult without vision. Fraternity members stood watching as the blindfolded pledges moved forward slowly, disoriented and terrified. Leggett stepped carefully, trying to find solid ground with each footfall. His sense of direction failed him. He misjudged where the edge was. His foot missed the tie and met only air. His body tipped sideways. He fell over the edge of the trestle. The blindfold remained tied around his eyes as he dropped. He fell through darkness he couldn't see, not knowing what was below or how far he would fall. The descent lasted several seconds. He hit the rocks and water at the bottom of the gorge with massive force. The impact fractured his skull. His bones shattered. Internal organs ruptured from the collision. Death was instant. When they recovered his body from the gorge, the blindfold was still tied securely around his eyes. Mortimer Leggett had died without ever seeing what killed him. Cornell faced scrutiny over the incident, but hazing practices continued despite his death. A trust exercise designed to test courage had become an execution, and a young man fell to his death while his fraternity brothers watched from above. The Vaseline stop sign. On August 17, 2011, two teenagers in rural Pickaway County, Ohio, decided to pull a prank on passing drivers. They took petroleum jelly and plastic wrap to a stop sign at a quiet intersection. They smeared the jelly thickly across the sign's surface and wrapped it in clear plastic. At night, the sign became completely invisible. Drivers would approach the intersection with no warning to stop. The teens wanted to watch the confusion as cars rolled through without stopping. That evening, 80-year-old Jean Shea was driving with her sister, 85-year-old Mary Spangler, in the passenger seat. They were traveling on familiar rural roads they had driven for years. As they approached the vandalized intersection, Shea saw nothing to indicate she should stop. The sign was there, but the petroleum jelly and plastic wrap made it impossible to see in the darkness. She drove through at normal speed. An SUV was approaching from the perpendicular road. That driver had the right of way. He saw Shea's car not stopping and tried to brake, but there wasn't enough time. The SUV struck the passenger side of the car at full speed. It was a T-bone collision. The impact crushed the passenger door inward. Metal crumpled directly into where Spangler sat. She absorbed the full force of the collision. At 85 years old, her body couldn't withstand the blunt trauma. Her ribs shattered. Internal organs were damaged beyond repair. She died instantly from the impact. Shea survived with injuries but lost her sister. Police found the teenagers shortly after. The petroleum jelly was still smeared across the stop sign, evidence of what they had done. They were arrested and charged. A simple prank designed to cause momentary confusion had made a stop sign invisible and sent an elderly woman through an intersection to her death. Compressed air. On November 14, 2024, Mohammed Kendirci arrived at a carpentry workshop in Bozova, a municipality in Şanlıurfa province, Turkey. Kendirci worked as an apprentice through the Vocational Training Centers program, learning the trade alongside other young workers. The workshop was a place where teenagers gained skills and earned money. That day, Kendirci was working his usual shift. Co-worker Habib Aksoy was also present, along with other workers in the facility. What began as workplace interaction turned violent. Aksoy and another unidentified person grabbed Kendirci. They tied his hands together, restraining him completely. His pants were forcibly removed. Aksoy took a high-pressure compressor, a tool typically used for cleaning sawdust and debris from workshop equipment. The machine generated air pressure strong enough to remove particles from tight spaces and machinery. The compressed air was directed into Kendirci's rectum. The pressure was extreme. The internal force caused catastrophic damage to his intestines and organs. Kendirci's condition deteriorated rapidly. Emergency services were called. He was transported first to Bozova Mehmet and Ver Yildirim State Hospital, then transferred to Balıklıgöl State Hospital, and finally to Harran University Research and Application Hospital, where he was admitted to the intensive care unit immediately. Kendirci remained in intensive care for 5 days. Medical staff worked to stabilize him, but the internal injuries were too severe. On November 19, 2024, Mohammed Kendirci died. Aksoy was arrested immediately following the incident but was released on probation. After Kendirci's death, authorities arrested Aksoy again and formally remanded him in custody. Turkish parliament member Suat Özçadaş publicly stated that the boy was subjected to torture. He criticized those who turn a blind eye to child labor in the country. The prosecutor's office had initially characterized the incident as joking around rather than torture. Authorities continued searching for the second suspect involved in the assault, retaliation shooting. On February 15, 2014, just before 1 o'clock in the morning, Adrienne Broadway was in a car with 6 other teenagers in Little Rock, Arkansas. The group had a specific destination in mind. Months earlier on Halloween, Willie Noble's teenage son had played a prank on them. Now it was time for payback. They called it a retaliation prank. The teenagers arrived at Noble's home with supplies, rolls of toilet paper, cartons of eggs, and mayonnaise. The vehicle stopped in front of Noble's home. The teenagers got out and vandalized his son's car with toilet paper, leaves, eggs, and mayonnaise. The prank was complete. The teenagers returned to their car and drove away from the property. Inside the house, 48-year-old Willie Noble heard the commotion. He came outside and saw his son's vandalized car. He went back inside and retrieved a firearm, telling his wife, "Whoever it is, they'll be back." Noble waited and watched. When the teenagers' vehicle returned and someone got out, Noble opened his front door and opened fire. 4 to 5 shots were fired. Bullets struck the fleeing car. The shattered glass from the gunfire caused injuries to the driver's hands. A bullet entered the vehicle and struck Broadway in the head. The car drove to a come-and-go gas station on Vaseline Road, where emergency services were called. Adrienne Broadway was transported to Little Rock's Children's Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Noble was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, committing a terroristic act, and 5 counts of aggravated assault. In November 2015, 50-year-old Noble was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole after 21 years. Noble claimed during the trial that he was just trying to scare them and was not aiming at anyone. Halloween noose accident. On September 22, 2013, Jordan Morlan spent his Sunday preparing his family's home in Fern Creek, Kentucky. Halloween was approaching, and Morlan enjoyed decorating. Born in Abilene, Texas, he was a 10th grade honor student at Fern Creek Traditional High School and a member of the junior ROTC rifle team. He loved books, was very artistic, and loved decorating for holidays. He dreamed of one day serving in the United States Marine Corps. That day, he worked on the front yard display. He had put up various Halloween decorations, including a noose hanging from a tree branch. His younger sister, Megan Kay, was nearby. Morlan decided to play a prank on her. He would pretend to hang himself from the decorative noose. It was meant to be a harmless scare, the kind of joke older siblings play on younger ones. He positioned himself beneath the rope and placed it around his neck. The plan was simple: act like he was hanging, wait for his sister to notice, then reveal the joke. Something went wrong. The noose tightened around his neck. It was not loose as he expected. The rope constricted, cutting off the flow of oxygen to his brain for 20 to 30 seconds. Megan saw him and immediately realized this was not a prank. She screamed for their mother. His mother, Ginger Rodriguez, ran outside and found him hanging from the tree. She attempted to cut him down, but was unable to remove her son from the tree. She called 911 immediately. Paramedics arrived, took him down, and transported him to University of Louisville Hospital. His brain had been deprived of oxygen. He was placed on a ventilator and slipped into a coma. Approximately 12 hours later, on the morning of September 23, 2013, around 8 o'clock, Jordan Morlan died from organ failure. Police investigated the incident and ruled his death an accident, egging chase accident. On December 2, 2006, just after midnight, Danny Crawford walked along West Broad Street in Columbus, Ohio, with 2 friends. The boys carried cartons of eggs. They had spent the evening throwing them at passing vehicles, a prank common among teenagers. Car after car drove by. The boys would wait for the right moment, then hurl eggs at the targets. Most drivers simply continued on their way, annoyed but unwilling to stop. Then a Jeep Cherokee approached. The boys threw eggs. Several struck the vehicle. This driver reacted differently. The Jeep did not keep driving. Instead, it immediately turned around. The vehicle began pursuing the teenagers. The boys realized what was happening and started running. The chase continued through the neighborhood streets. Michael Shane Gross Jr. was riding as a passenger in the Jeep. The vehicle pulled ahead and stopped. Gross Jr. exited the vehicle. He began shooting at the fleeing teenagers. Crawford was still running. Bullets flew through the air. One struck Crawford. He collapsed at 28 North Terrace Avenue. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation began immediately, but the case went cold. Years passed without an arrest. The Columbus Division of Police Cold Case Homicide Unit continued working to solve the case. Detectives worked to convince witnesses to provide information. Police had located and impounded the Jeep Cherokee involved in the incident shortly after the shooting. However, the gun used in the shooting was not discovered until months later during a search of the impounded vehicle. The evidence was recovered. Michael Shane Gross Jr., 22 years old, was charged with murder and tampering with evidence. At the time of his arrest for Crawford's murder, Gross was already in jail on unrelated charges. Crawford's father, Danny Crawford, expressed relief that detectives never gave up on the case. The family could finally take a deep deep breath, knowing investigators had stayed with it and not let it die off. Panther prank, tragedy. On October 20th, 2021, 18-year-old Rachel Olivia Buchanan spent the evening at the home of Jake Barber and his fiancée Autumn Nichols in Henderson County, North Carolina. Buchanan's fiancé, Chris Shields Jr., was also present. During the evening, Buchanan realized she had forgotten her phone charger at the home she shared with Shields, located down the road. Buchanan asked Shields if he could retrieve the charger. Barber offered to go along for safety reasons due to local legends about a Black Panther in the area. Before leaving, both men armed themselves with firearms and walked down the road. While the men were gone, Buchanan and Nichols devised a plan to surprise them when they returned. The women gathered a dozen expired eggs and positioned themselves approximately 15 feet down an embankment. Nichols squatted close to the ground while Buchanan bent over from the waist. Nichols passed gas, causing both women to laugh quietly. As the men walked back, they heard sounds they perceived as a growl and sticks breaking. They saw a dark figure in the shadows. Perceiving a threat, both men fired multiple rounds. Buchanan was struck 3 times. One bullet grazed her forehead. Another hit her left forearm. The fatal 9mm projectile discharged from Barber's firearm, entered her scalp, exited near her left earlobe, re-entered her upper chest, and perforated vital organs including her heart. After hearing screaming, both men immediately dropped their weapons and ran to help. They provided first aid and performed CPR until paramedics arrived. Buchanan died while being transported to Pardee Hospital. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation handled the case due to a connection between a Henderson County Sheriff's Office employee and one of the parties involved. District Attorney Andrew Murray ruled the shooting a tragic accident. No charges were filed. Both men had the lawful right to possess and discharge weapons outside city limits. Blood tests confirmed no alcohol or substances were involved. Murray stated they both firmly believed the growling shadow in the darkness was a threat to their safety. Topgolf, horseplay, death. On December 21st, 2021, 22-year-old Connor Groom arrived at Topgolf in Chigwell, Essex, England for his company's Christmas party. He worked as a bricklayer and was joined by several friends from work. Topgolf features multiple levels, where groups hit golf balls at targets on a driving range below, with safety nets installed between the hitting bays and the drop to the range. The group had been drinking heavily throughout the evening. After arriving around 7 in the evening, they consumed alcohol at the bar before heading to their bay on the first floor around 8. Once there, the friends began playing pranks on each other, pushing and nudging one another onto the safety nets. The behavior was seen as a joke among the group. CCTV footage reviewed by police showed at least 7 instances of pushing or attempted pushing. Groom himself had been pushed onto the netting twice and had pushed one friend as well. Topgolf staff warned the group multiple times to stop messing around. The group apologized and said they would not do it again, but the warnings were ignored. Just after 10 in the evening, Ben Gardner, Groom's best friend, who had not participated in the previous pushing, came running from behind and executed a 2-handed push on Groom. Groom's momentum carried him forward over the safety net. His foot briefly caught in the netting, causing him to lose control of his landing. He fell approximately 12 feet, landing headfirst on the driving range below. The impact caused a traumatic cervical spinal cord injury and hypoxic brain injury. Emergency services transported him to Royal London Hospital, where his condition worsened over the following weeks. On January 25th, 2022, 5 weeks after the fall, Connor Groom died. Gardner was arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm without intent, but charges were dropped after consultation with the Crown Prosecution Service and Groom's family. The family did not support prosecution. In May 2024, Essex Senior Coroner Lincoln Brooks ruled the death as misadventure, describing it as inebriated but not malicious horseplay. Following the incident, Topgolf implemented enhanced staff training, updated signage, stricter enforcement, and created a player safety manager role. Doorbell prank gone wrong. On May 3rd, 2025, around 3 o'clock in the morning, 18-year-old Michael Bosworth Jr. drove through a neighborhood in Spotsylvania County, Virginia, with 2 friends. Bosworth was a senior at Massaponax High School. Later that day, his school would be holding prom. He played lacrosse and football for the school. That early morning, the 3 teenagers were filming content for TikTok. They had decided to perform a ding-dong ditch prank. The concept was simple. Ring a doorbell, run away, and record the reaction. The group was not familiar with the area, but had already visited several houses in the neighborhood. They arrived at a home on Mackenzie Lane belonging to Tyler Chase Butler. According to court documents, the teenagers climbed over a 6-foot privacy fence into Butler's backyard and kicked and banged on his basement door. The group immediately fled. They ran to find hiding spots. Butler emerged from his house. He raised a firearm and fired multiple shots at the fleeing teenagers. One of the teens with Bosworth was grazed by a bullet. Bosworth was struck in the back. According to the search warrant affidavit, the teenagers stated they were running to hide when they were shot at. One teen had a video on his phone showing them performing the prank at a different home earlier that day. Butler initially told police that Bosworth and the other teenagers were trying to break into his home. The teenagers told detectives they were not breaking in to steal anything. They were just recording ding-dong ditch pranks. Michael Bosworth Jr. died that day at Mary Washington Hospital. Butler was detained for questioning but was not immediately charged. On May 6, 2025, the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's Office announced that Butler had been arrested. He was charged with second-degree murder, malicious wounding, and 2 counts of use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Butler is being held without bond at Rappahannock Regional Jail. Surveillance video from Butler's home captured him making threatening statements before and after the shooting. Jump scare shot. On September 5th, 2022, Labor Day morning, Dominique McCoy visited a friend's home in the 4300 block of Stubner Hill Drive in northwest Harris County, Texas. McCoy was spending time at the residence of 17-year-old Reginald Smalls. The 2 teenagers were friends. According to court documents read during a probable cause hearing, McCoy decided to play a prank on Smalls. He hid inside the bathroom of the home. He waited for the right moment. When Smalls walked past, McCoy jumped out suddenly to scare him. It was meant to be a joke, the kind friends play on each other. Smalls allegedly reacted to being startled by firing a weapon. The gunshot struck McCoy in the chest. Police responded to the home just before 10 in the morning. Officers found McCoy in the restroom with a gunshot wound. Emergency services rushed him to the hospital. He was pronounced dead. Court records showed that Smalls had no prior criminal history, including as a juvenile. After his arrest, Smalls was taken to a detention facility. While there, he allegedly assaulted a detention officer who was attempting to prevent him from tampering with a camera inside a jail cell. Smalls hit the officer and threw him to the ground. This led to an additional charge of assaulting a public servant. Smalls was charged with manslaughter in McCoy's death. A judge set his bond at $100,000 for the manslaughter charge. The bond was later raised to $150,000 total when the assault charge was added. Smalls was not present at his probable cause hearing because he had been admitted to a mental health unit for unspecified reasons. The judge stated that based upon the very dangerous nature of a 17-year-old being in possession of a firearm, the court will find a high bond is necessary in order to ensure community safety. Another friend who was present, 18-year-old Leckadrick Bowden Jr., was charged with tampering with evidence for attempting to hide the gun used in the shooting. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.